Well, hello, welcome everyone. From my side here in London, I'm James Wood, representing GC Magazine and the Legal 500 here today. And hello to all of you in our audience, both to those of you we can see joining the room as we speak, and to those of you joining directly through LinkedIn who we can't see. So as I should have said, a webinar is called How Tech-Backed Businesses Are Transforming the Legal Process, or Transforming Legal Processes, plural, in North America. Before we get down to things, I just want to give a quick plug to our newly released report on legal tech in North America. Look, we're drawing on a lot of the same themes here today, so I do encourage you all to go away and read it, and we'll put a link in the webinar page now it's finally live. That was a report we put together with World Services Group, which I'm sure you all know is a leading professional services network of independent firms and other professional services advisory firms. It's part of a series that has so far covered Europe, Latin America, Asia Pacific, and now North America. And in total, we have surveyed around 1,000 senior counsel for these reports. So it's becoming one of the more robust data sets on change in the in-house legal profession when it comes to technology. And that's, of course, what we'll be covering in today's webinar. But legal tech is obviously a huge subject. You can go from artificial intelligence to design thinking to process improvement to online courts and onto other topics without ever really scratching the surface. So rather than go through a series of slides or discuss the issues in abstract terms, we're going to get a practical take from a number of very interesting general counsel and law firm partners. So let's start by having them briefly introduce themselves. So Paul, I'm going to ask you to give us a very short introduction. So Paul Slattery of Ellucis.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. My name is Paul Slattery. I spent about a decade litigating a law firm called Quinn Emanuel, and I did a lot of patent litigation, general commercial litigation, and then some interesting war stories like repossessing an Oscar. And about a year ago, I jumped over to be the general counsel of an entity called Ellucis, and we are a psychedelic pharmaceutical company.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll get some more on what exactly a psychedelic pharmaceutical company does slightly later. Michael, how about you? Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hi James. Thanks for having me as well. GC at a company called Banyan Software. Banyan is a fast-growing, long-hold PE fund in the software and related technology space. I joined Banyan just as COVID was sort of kicking into overdrive about 18 months ago. We've been on a busy acquisition spree over the last year. And prior to joining Banyan, I worked at a large, what became a large technology conglomerate in a number of different roles, including as GC of one of the operating divisions there over a 9-year period. And before that, I practiced corporate securities and IT law over a couple of stints at one of the large firms in Canada called Basket.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much for joining. And let's turn now to Reggie Davies. Reggie.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to the next hour and a half learning from all the other panelists. Currently, I'm general counsel at a company called Qualia, which is basically digital transformation for real estate in North America. Prior to that, I was general counsel at a company called DocuSign that was a signature company worldwide. Prior to that, general counsel at Zynga, and prior to that, I was at Yahoo. So I can't actually keep a job. I keep moving from one job to the other, and I've been lucky enough to land at some fun companies that are doing some pretty cool digital transformation work. Looking forward to speaking to everybody today.
Excellent, thank you. And Chris Kazarian of DreamHost, can see he's just joined us. Chris, do you want to give us a very short introduction?
Of course, I'll make it quick. So my name is Chris Kazarian. So DreamHost is a web hosting, domains, and cloud company based here in Los Angeles. And I've been with them for about 8 years since law school. And so privacy is a huge part of what we do. And so a lot of our day-to-day is spent on data privacy and protecting customer data. But yeah, it's a great gig. There's a lot of overlap between technology and what we do on a daily basis. So it turns out to be quite an interesting job when you're dealing with a lot of external companies and a lot of people who are trying to gain access to data, not only foul players, but also, let's say, big government or any other parties. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Are you all right for alcohol, Chris? Looks like you're running low in the background there.
Sorry for the delay. I was,
The bottles of wine behind you.
yeah, exactly.
Expensive cellar you've got. Okay, excellent. Well, let's turn to our World Services Group member firms who are joining us. So first, Batya Forsyth of Hanson Bridget. So Batya.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. Yes, I'm a partner with Hanson Bridget here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're a California-based firm. I have a couple of hats relevant here. One is I'm the head of our litigation section, and in that role, I work very closely with our e-discovery team, and so we'll be touching on some issues there. And I'm also the head of our privacy and information governance group.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. We also have Eric Lavallee of Lavery Lawyers. So Eric.
Thank you for having me. I'm the imposter here. I am a physicist with a PhD in electrical engineering, turned lawyer and trademark agent. At Lavery, we have a team of over 200 professionals, including lawyers, notaries, trademark, patent agent, paralegals, and we're committed at being a one-stop shop for the province of Quebec. We cover various fields of law, corporate, labor, employment litigation, and intellectual property. And I personally work in the intellectual property field and also a bit on the corporate side. So we have 4 offices in the province of Quebec, and I'm personally in charge of our Lavery Legal Lab on artificial intelligence. So thank you again.
Excellent. And can you let me know just how badly did I mispronounce your last name? How awful you pronounced?
Lavallee.
Lavallee. Okay, I wasn't too far off. Excellent, thank you. And last but not least, we have Tom Chen, who's a partner at Haynes & Boone. Tom, want to give us a quick introduction?
All right, sure. Thanks, James. So Tom Chen, I'm a partner at Haynes & Boone. We're an About 100 firm based in Dallas. I've been a patent lawyer for 25 years now. And previous to that, I was an engineer at Hughes Aircraft, so I've been in technology for quite a while.
Excellent, great. Well, look, thank you all for joining today. So one final comment before we kick off. I should also say hi to the audience, both in the room now, which I guess mostly World Services Group partners, but also those joining direct from LinkedIn. So do please say hi, ask any questions, make comments and the like. That goes both to the GCs joining us today and to the various World Services Group member firm partners in the audience. This is a good chance for you to put questions to our panel. Okay, well, let's start. And without wanting to sound like Tristram Shandy, I'm going to start not with the rise of legal tech and the ways it has shaped your working lives, but something else. So let's start with the growing importance of tech-backed businesses, and particularly, I guess, high-growth businesses to the in-house profession. I mean, anecdotally, this seems to be a big thing right now. There was a piece in the American Lawyer recently looking at why startups are becoming so popular. I think the latest ACC members survey had something about this, essentially saying that working for a startup or a high growth company, a tech-backed business, is now the dream job for a lot of people looking to move in-house, which is an interesting trend. So Paul, I'm going to come to you first, because you had a pretty interesting career at Quinn Emanuel as a litigator. I think you mentioned in your intro, so you represented the magician Criss Angel in some of his suits. You did the 3 largest ever lawsuits in sequence, back to back, right? I think it was Apple, Samsung, TCW, and Grundlach, and Apple Qualcomm. So you did all this exciting stuff as a litigator. What was it that attracted you to a move in-house with Elucis?
Sure. So I think there's sort of 2 things about these emerging growth companies that are interesting if you're looking to go in-house. The first is it's often very clear how a lawyer contributes to the value chain. You're not just going to wind up being a cost center. So, particularly coming from litigation, there are not a lot of in-house opportunities, or if they are, it's often to, manage a portfolio of litigation that may be less interesting than what you were doing before. But in a company like Elucis, or a lot of emerging growth companies, in Elucis's case, between the FDA and the Patent and Trademark Office, it felt like it was obvious how a lawyer, and particularly a litigator, could add a lot to the value we're trying to create. So I think that's one appealing part of emerging growth companies. Often they're in innovative spaces, often they're subject to a lot of regulation, and a lawyer can just clearly add a great deal more. And the other thing is the opportunities to sort of build your department from scratch. That often feels like you're building a ship while you're sailing it, which can be a little bit nerve-wracking. But you're rarely dealing with some kind of legacy system that somebody else picked that you would have never chosen. You get to sort of build your own framework, build your own policies, build your own operating environment, and build your team. So I think the combination of those two things, where it's obvious how you're contributing value, or what often is, and that you get to sort of build your own tree fort, are the things that make going to an emerging growth company attractive.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, at least this isn't, I guess, a traditional or a straight tech company. It's obviously in the life sciences space, but it's, I mean, I guess it applies tech to its market, and these days, nearly every industry. I mean, I think you comment in the report that I was plugging earlier. You know, every industry has been updated by tech and what it makes possible. But that hasn't quite happened in the legal industry yet. What are your views on that? I mean, do you think it's time for the legal industry to kind of wake up to the sort of disruption that's happened in other fields?
Sure. I mean, law has been characteristically slow on this front. This is this is an industry that still organizes many of its major institutions as partnerships, and that continues to operate on the billable hour. But I think it will get there. I think there's sort of two major changes that are coming, and one will be the reliance on, I'm sure there's a lot of what Eric is doing, on artificial intelligence, on natural language processing, and on machine learning. So that started to happen quite a bit when I was in litigation. There's a lot of technology-assisted review to identify relevant documents, and what that did in litigation was really reduce the team size you needed to review, millions and millions of documents. And it's interesting because you're starting now to rely on technology to do your relevance review, right? And there are ethical obligations there. And I think the same is likely coming for a lot of in-house work. So if you review 1,000 NDAs, all of which are everyone's little bespoke flavor of NDA, what you find out quickly is that there's an immense amount of variation to arrive at the same 5 terms, right? And this is something that could very easily, whether through machine learning, through some sort of review platform, learn your preferences, learn what matters to you, and pick out the relevant terms and speed up review. And again, I think it's pointing in the same direction, which is you don't need as much headcount, and there isn't as much grind work. And I think the other major change is just that it truly does not matter where your team is, where you're working. So I'm in Venice Beach, my deputy is in New York, my paralegal is in Florida, and my deputy spent the last month in South Africa. And other than time zones, that didn't matter. And what that does is open up recruiting a lot. Traditionally, you're looking at just sort of major metropolitan areas where lawyers are clustered around offices. You may be able to recruit people who are in much lower cost of living areas. You may be able to offer people who are working for you the opportunity to sort of move wherever they want, to go live on a lake somewhere, as opposed to just, being attached to a subway line. And I think that's a big change in the way the legal industry operates. And I think we'll see more and more of it over the course of the next 10 years.
Excellent, cool. Well, I'm going to turn to Reggie now. So Reggie, Paul talks about the opportunity to build from scratch. And I guess you're a kind of serial startup guy. I don't quite know how to put it, but I mean, you've worked at some of the most successful tech companies in the world. You joined Yahoo when it was a small company. You did the same with Zynga and DocuSign. Obviously, these have all become huge. So you've got a pretty formidable record of seeing tech businesses through to growth. I mean, is that something that rings true with you, this opportunity to build a legal team from scratch and giving you the freedom to do new things?
I think that's a great comment that Paul made around your ability to be flexible and distributed as opposed to just in the office. I guess some would say I can't keep a job because I keep moving from one to the other. When I've looked back over my favorite times in my career, it's when the company was relatively small and you knew everybody there. And as Paul said, you have a chance to really inflect and shape the business that I've enjoyed the most. And then once you get bigger and you get public, things get kind of in swim lanes and silos, and it becomes relatively repetitive. So I keep going back to small companies because I really do enjoy the experience there. And one of the experiences I enjoy the most is the opportunity to build teams. And each one of those companies, we've grown from myself starting there as the first legal anything to having, 90 plus people on the teams at DocuSign and elsewhere. So lots of fun doing that. Very, very exciting experience. And I think the digital transformation opportunity that the companies provide are really, really fun. At DocuSign, it was very much a horizontal software where any kind of the last inch, any place you could sign a document, you could use DocuSign and that would generate the signature. And that was kind of fun. At Qualia, it's much more of a vertically integrated software where we literally have real estate folks operating their businesses sitting on top of our platform in a very integrated vertical sort of software configuration, which I'm really finding interesting working in that space. And in North American real estate, primarily back east, a lot of the final applications of the real estate transaction have to be done by lawyers. So it's been exciting to be able to work at a company where we're bringing digital transformation to those companies.
Can you just say a little bit about what it is that Qualia does? I mean, for the benefit
Yeah,
of
so basically think of a real estate agents and or lenders, mortgage brokers, or title agents logging into Qualia onto our core platform and literally operating your business off of our platform. So from the start to the end, any transaction in a buy or sell motion, and primarily in a refi motion. I think in North America in particular, people are very frustrated with the real estate process. I think it's incredibly ripe for digital transformation. Anyone that's bought a house or refinanced the house have basically been staggered by how antiquated the process can be. Lots and lots of paper. You have to go to a title agent office to close the transaction, signing all the pages, et cetera. There's really no need for that. It's incredibly ripe for digital transformation, basically taking a legacy, old, antiquated paper process system and making it all digital. I honestly believe in the not so distant future, you'll be able to pull up your iPhone and literally transact a sale or purchase of your home off of your iPhone and or refinance your home off of your iPhone. And you'll actually have better information, more transparency, more clarity, literally on your phone than you have in the transaction now at great reduced cost. I think that's the thing that is the most intriguing about digital transformation in general. There is a huge economic engine that is driving digital transformation, which is driving up efficiencies, reducing costs, and making things much more transparent to people. That's why companies like DocuSign did as well as they have done, and other digital companies are doing as well. It's not just because people want to adopt a digital platform because they just think, oh, I want to wake up one day and adopt a digital platform. They're reducing their costs, they're increasing their efficiency. There's huge drivers as to why there's so much disruption going on in the market today. And we're hopefully capitalizing on that at Qualia.
Excellent, great, thank you. Look, just to round this out, I guess I should ask Michael and Chris what their views are on this. I know you don't have exactly the same backgrounds here, but was the opportunity to build from scratch something that you found attractive in your in-house role? Maybe Chris, you give a thought on this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in the process of still growing the team right now again. And so it's a fantastic experience because I think it gives in-house attorneys the ability to go ahead and shape and morph everything to their tastes. And especially when you're in-house in a business, I mean, this probably touches on something else you're about to ask soon, but business and law go hand in hand. And so when you're looking at the legal health of a company, I think your other goal is always to go ahead and grow the company and be a strategic player for the company. And so when you're building the team, when it's still relatively small, you have a lot of control over the processes, you have a lot of control over the people, and you can hire and put people in place that also have similar goals of shaping the company, not just being a legal silo. As Reggie mentioned, there are a lot of legal teams, or that may used to be the normal, like in-house, where legal was looked at as a blocker. Legal was looked at as the bad team because you're like, oh, I need a contract. I need to send it to legal, Jesus Christ. But these days, a lot of legal teams in-house play key roles with management. And so building it from scratch and making sure that they're growth centered as opposed to growth oriented, as opposed to just being a siloed contract reviewer is a very big deal.
Michael, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to build on some of the things that other folks were saying, when I first went in-house from private practice, I joined a company called Constellation Software, which at the time was, we were public, but was pretty small. I think there was a GC, and the GC hired a more senior lawyer to manage one of the divisions, and then I was sort of the junior corporate lawyer that came in to, out of private practice to basically be the right-hand person to the GC and help them out. And, over a period of about 9 or 10 years, just being there, I saw so much growth, and I got to really experience a lot of different types of law, worked on transactions in maybe almost 20 different countries, and it's just amazing to see how we grew. But I felt some of the things that Reggie mentioned before too, you know, by the time I left. So I think when I joined, I was lawyer 2 or 3. And by the time I left, I think there were over 60 lawyers maybe in the company. I sort of lost track, you know, and, you know, people were in their swim lanes and so on. And I sort of missed that vibe of you know, being part of something, and they're still growing very fast and it's an impressive business, but just being part of something that's in its more nascent stages and being able to contribute to that, know everybody on the team and sort of, you know, help shape the growth trajectory of the company more directly. So, you know, I was kind of looking for that sort of thing, and that's why I came, you know, to my next role here. But so I think, you know, for a lot of the reasons that all the folks have already said, I feel the same way.
Sure. I guess I should give the folks who have remained as partners in their firms an opportunity to chip in here. So I don't know if Eric, Tom, or Batya have any views on this when it comes to representing high growth tech clients or just high growth clients in general. Does that change the kind of dynamics there in terms of the advice you're giving?
Of course, when we have high-tech clients, their expectation in terms of technology that we use are probably higher. We have to sometimes work with their own set of tools, platforms, integrate our work with their way of handling the documents. While when we're working with lower tech clients, sometimes we have to propose the solutions to for example, do a due diligence process.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know if Batya, Tom, you have any thoughts on that before we move on?
I agree with what Eric just said. I don't know if I could really add to that. I know we're going to touch on some topics later that will exemplify that, but I completely agree.
Okay. Well, look, Reggie, I'm just going to come back to you for a second because you've been a fairly regular presence or semi-regular presence at CLOC, which I guess everyone knows the organization that kind of brings legal operations and tech professionals together. I mean, what sort of momentum have you observed around the interest in legal tech just from attending those conferences over the years?
Yeah, so I mean, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, also known as CLOC, is now worldwide, started in North America, but expanded to Asia and Europe. I presented at a conference several years back, and there was about 200 people in the audience, and it was kind of interesting, and it was sort of felt a little niche. People had sort of a legal operations person attending from various departments, primarily bigger legal in-house departments. I presented a couple of years ago, right before COVID hit, and there was over 3,000 people in the audience from all over the country. And just a quantum leap in terms of how many people are focusing on legal operations, because there's just literally scores and scores of companies now that are there. I think I saw some data that said, you know, since 2016, there's been 280 legal technology startups which have amassed more than $757 million investments from VCs. So there's huge momentum going into the space around legal operations and bringing software applications from contract management to, we've already mentioned briefly, digital discovery, to how you can process and manage NDAs in a very efficient, very effective way at greatly reduced cost. All of those companies are there basically offering that software. So it's a pretty amazing start. What I think is really interesting, and I think people have probably heard this phrase a few times before, that we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and vastly underestimate the impact of technology over time. And I think that's exactly what's happening now. I could see a time in the future where many legal contracts really look like an Excel spreadsheet, where you're allocating specific language to specific slots so that you can actually process what was otherwise unallocated data into allocated data, and you will be able to process contracts. We already see AI doing that now, and that's without the format and the structure that you could put in place as an in-house contract attorney. You put that structure in place, your ability to actually process your contracts, understand your contracts, anticipate churn of the customers in your contract. And as someone else mentioned, we are oftentimes perceived as a cost center. You know, reducing the cost of the service that you're providing greatly through digital and automation, I think is something that's, we're in full wave mode now, but I think we're underestimating just how impactful that's going to be over time. So huge engine behind that. And again, I probably sound a little bit like a broken record, but it's, you know, reducing cost, driving really incredible efficiency, and then transparency. I mean, at DocuSign, we saw people, oftentimes it would take them weeks, if not months, to get contracts signed. We would push a contract out to many multi-parties in different jurisdictions, and those contracts were being signed in a matter of 15 minutes. I mean, so you went from weeks and months to get contracts signed through paper and FedEx and mailing it around to literally having the entire transaction completed at the signature stage in less than 15 minutes. So it's amazing just how impactful I think the digital transformation can be to the legal industry, and we're only going to see more of it as time progresses.
And it's funny you're so positive about this, because a lot of the discourse around legal tech focuses on the negatives of lawyers being worried about the profession being disrupted, tech coming to eat the lunch, eat your lunch as a lawyer. But I mean, that clearly isn't true, right? I mean, you're in-house in particular are very positive about this. And sorry, go.
So I was just saying, I think it's a nuanced discussion. I think oftentimes people sort of gravitate to, oh, lawyers do certain lawyer things, and now technology is going to come in and take everybody's lunch. And basically take their jobs away. And I think that there's a certain truth to that. There's going to be reduction in terms of the need, but what we're seeing is most of those are rote procedures that are very ripe for being automated. I mean, I don't know how many junior lawyers want to sit in a room and take a bunch of documents out of a banker's box, put them into a Redwell and write the name of the company that they're serving or the department within the company they're serving, and then go stack those on a shelf. I mean, who really wants to do that? And as an early lawyer in the early days, not so long ago, a lot of litigation associates and young lawyers were doing just that kind of work. Now that can be all automated. And I think it really frees up the lawyer to do more of the actual counseling and to be a consigliere to the business and actually lean in and focus their energies on the things where they can be most impactful. You're always going to need a lawyer to tell you, what are your instincts around a particular regulation applying to a particular type of work that we're doing? And are we going to be in harm's way, or is there a concern there? And there's no amount of automation that's going to be able to totally answer that. Although there is some automation that can predict the outcome of a case now. And I think that's starting to see some real traction. I do think you're always going to need a well-trained, well-versed lawyer to support and advise the business, no matter how much automation you have at your company.
And NDAs, I guess, are the other one. I think you said earlier, it was probably off this record, but I'm sure you don't mind repeating it, that NDAs it's one of those things that people spend a lot of time on that are typically not that important. Automating, that's a huge benefit, right?
Right. I mean, there are LawGeeks as a company, I think, out of Israel that's actually produced some data, and sort of the high level is take 20 partners looking at 20 NDAs, take 20 junior associates looking at 20 NDAs, and then have AI do the same. The partners graded out about 45 minutes per NDA, and they basically graded out around 92 to 90%, 6% of we identified the issues we care about, we identified the language that we don't want in there. An associate took about an hour and a half per NDA, and they graded out at around a 64% of efficacy level. The automated AI technology at LawGeeks basically graded out at the same level as senior partner, 92 to 96%, and they did the 20 NDAs in 12 seconds. 12 seconds compared to 1.3 hours, compared to 45 minutes, literally the same efficacy in 12 seconds that you had a senior partner. So there's clearly huge opportunities for digital transformation in that context.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, Michael, I'm going to turn to you now, because I think LawGeeks is one of the companies you've worked with, but I know you've had a fair bit of experience using legal tech to handle routine legal work. So I guess a two-part question here. So firstly, what are some of the best use cases of legal technology you've come across? And I guess secondly, what do those technologies struggle to do as effectively? Where are they kind of still lacking?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. And, you know, one other analogy, just before I jump into that, I was just hearing Reggie talk. You know, I remember talking to one of the senior partners I used to work with in private practice, and he were telling me how when they started out in practice as a junior lawyer, their big part of their job was preparing red lines or black lines. But instead of using a comparison tool, they would sit there for 6 hours and compare two documents and use a ruler and underline things. So, you know, I don't think anyone misses doing that. And I think we all still have plenty of work to do without it. So I'm not too worried about these technologies taking away work from lawyers. And, you know, I think as the in-house community sort of has to work under, you know, increasingly probably extreme conditions in terms of, you know, not having a huge amount of people in the department, or, that just that perception to not, that law is a cost center. We want to try to keep it as lean as possible. I think these technologies can be very helpful. Like Reggie mentioned, definitely have used LawGeeks before, sort of introduced to them actually by another GC in town in Toronto named Steve Kresak. So I should give him the credit for bringing them to my attention, but I had a bit of an NDA problem in a previous role, just in terms of getting a ton of different M&A related NDAs in a sort of corporate development type situation. And I ended up working with LawGeeks. I thought they were great. It took probably about a month to train the AI. And at the time, they had a 24-hour guaranteed turnaround. But in talking to them recently, I'm not using them right now, but thinking about it, I think they've increased their turnaround time to 6 hours, which I thought was impressive. And the contact at the company told me an anecdote of another large in-house department which implemented LawGeeks for a certain type of contract, and they actually did not tell their salespeople that they were using LawGeeks, and everyone was just completely blown away by the turnaround time that they were getting. Which I thought was sort of a little bit funny. Hopefully, it's not setting unrealistic expectations for the rest of us lawyers. Another technology I've implemented in the past is Kira. I think probably a lot of the folks like Eric on here will be, familiar with them. They're sort of an M&A.
Right? They are Canadian, I believe. Is that?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Toronto University. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but I think they came out of their startup program. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I think that is correct. The lawyer who founded it, I believe, is a fellow named Noah Weisberg. He, I think, is a Canadian that went down to practice in the States for a while and then ended up founding Kira. I think he is from Toronto, actually, or maybe Montreal. I'm not sure. But anyway, I think they were recently sold. They're still around. I think Latera just bought them, and it's a very helpful tool, for streamlining contract review. I think a lot of the large firms use it to help their associates get through the due diligence. I gotta say, I wish that they had that when I was a junior associate. But all kidding aside, I think the difficulty I had implementing that, I thought the tool itself was very good. It's just in having a lean team, it was sort of a little bit hard to find, to make sure everyone was using it properly. In the end, we sort of found like a champion within our group that was able to sort of be the go-to person for that, and that helped roll it out, make sure everyone was using it. But I thought it was pretty neat and pretty helpful. And they have maybe it's worth noting, they have a bunch of different templates for certain types of agreements that it can find for a license agreement, for employment agreement. It can find limitation of liability, change of control, and it's sort of trained by AI, so it won't just find something that's called change of control. We'll actually find something that's has the same meaning as change of control, but doesn't actually say those words, which I think is important, and it kind of learns as time goes on.
So just to jump in, how useful is that to you? I mean, what would you do in the absence of that? And essentially ask the junior member of staff to go and do the research on your behalf?
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. Like it's the alternative is either hire external counsel to, have a bunch of juniors grind through the documents, create a table or summaries of them, or have a junior person on your staff do that. And, when you're trying to close a bunch of transactions, different things going on end of the quarter, I don't think that's the best use of people's time. So, this is a lot more efficient. And like Reggie was saying, the Kira can come back and turn a bunch of documents very, very quickly. And you can kind of OCRs everything. And then it basically spits out what you would sort of expect as, the summary tables that you would get 10 years ago from your law firm, or 15 years ago, where the students or the associates would produce these, summaries of each document. It can basically do that. You still have to look at it, but nobody has to sit there and go through, and make those, which is a huge amount of time. Something else that I've interacted with recently, which is not a tool I've purchased before, but our external counsel had them, is a tool called Blue Jay Legal. I believe they're actually also out of Toronto, and I think they were initially a tax-related solution, but was involved in a sort of pre-litigation matter here. And our external counsel actually was able to pull a bunch of sort of a report from Blue Jay that basically said, these are the parameters of the case, this is the kind of situation we're dealing with. If these kind of cases have gone to court recently, these were the results. And he gave us a lot better sense of, the parameters of what we were negotiating about and what would be a fair settlement and what would be the risk if we didn't settle. So I thought it was cool. Some of the folks actually at Fasken, I think we're using that. And I found that pretty helpful. Also, another one on the M&A side, it's not really AI related, but it's closing folders. I think a lot of folks are sort of seeing that now. It's sort of been helpful in coordinating closings and signatures. And I believe they, I don't want to put words in Reggie's mouth. I'm pretty sure they said they have some kind of interface with DocuSign as well. And I found that really helpful just in terms of streamlining things. And I've been impressed recently when a couple of different large corporate firms were able to sort of cooperate with each other and conduct a closing completely electronically that way during COVID, which I thought was great. Those are the key ones that I can think of right now. And in terms of your other question about the difficulties that I've had with these or that people might have, I mean, I don't know if it's the technology itself that's necessarily the problem. It's just more thinking about how you use it on your team and making sure that people are aware of it, making sure that it's used properly. People are properly trained, and you think about how everyone's going to interact with it. I think that's more of the issue than whether or not it works, because I think generally these technologies do work. So you just kind of have to make sure that they're the right fit for what you're trying to do, and you're able to have the time and focus to implement them with your team and make sure everyone's using it.
That's interesting. I guess we'll come back to that point in just a moment, but there's two questions that come out of what you're saying. One to Eric, one to Chris. So I'm going to jump now to Eric. So Eric, I think you alluded to your background in your intro. So you're a physicist, and I think you spent a fairly significant portion of your career coding control systems, right? So
Yes.
You've got some understanding of this, but obviously you also have an ongoing professional interest in tech. So I'm guessing you're familiar with most of the tools Michael discussed just then, and perhaps some others. So I'd be interested to get your views on the challenges you've encountered when it comes to working with these legal technologies and tech companies from a law firm side.
Yes, we've tested the tools Michael mentioned and a few other ones. One of the things is that many of these tools are not adapted in working into multilingual environment. Here in Quebec, we must ensure that we provide the same level of service, the same quality of service in French and in English. While theoretically possible for a lot of those tools, our test shows some important discrepancies in results depending on the language that was used. But it's not just a language issue. Here we work with a civil code, and many of these tools were designed with common law in mind. Sometimes because we work in international deals, we see that the tools provide very good answers when working with the US document, but they lack somehow when working with the civil code document. So sometimes the vendors are not aware of the differences, and or they lack the required data to train their tools properly. So there's an issue of the maturity of the tools. I was talking with a vendor a couple of weeks ago who told me, well, last year it was in his plan to give better training in French for his tool. And this year it is still in his plan to provide training in French, but at least now he's aware of the issues and of the hurdle for various countries, various jurisdictions using such tools in other language or in other legal systems. And we've seen also similar issues working in a deal where we were trying to use Chinese documents that it did not provide any yield with these documents. So this affects the reliability of the solution. And when we want to use such tools with our clients, especially when we're using client-facing application, the tools that the client access directly, sends the document, and sometimes see the same results as we see, we must be able to assess the security and the reliability of those tools. So these are not just black boxes. We must try to understand the legal text, how they work, what's the technology behind it, and measure the reliability somehow. So we have a learning curve collectively as lawyers to understand better these tools, and understand their limitation, and also to provide adequate feedback to the vendors, and that's what we're trying to do here, so that the tools mature and become more reliable and sufficient for the use that we want to make of them.
Do the vendors listen to you when you give that feedback? Do they take it on board, or do they try to dismiss it?
Yes, they listen to us. That's the good news. They take notes. Sometimes it takes some time to implement what we ask, because it's not as easy as just modifying the interface and having a more user-friendly tool. Sometimes they need to think about it and find better solution. For example, natural language processing in several language is a technological challenge for them. So that's why it's a long-term work effort and collaboration effort with the vendors.
Can I ask, you maybe don't want to comment, but just generally, do you think lawyers understand the tools they're either using or recommending to others? I mean, clearly you do, right? But I mean, if you hear a lawyer talking about neural networks, as a physicist, do you instantly think, you have no idea how a neural network operates? Do lawyers understand what they're prescribing to others?
Some are more tech inclined and do understand what they're using, at least from using it. They've gathered some sense of what it gives and what it does. I've seen, unfortunately, lawyers believing that these are magical solutions, that they will always work, that will be 100% efficient, and relying on the solution to take decision without checking if it's the right decision in the end. So yes, we must educate ourselves as lawyers to better understand these technologies.
Okay, and Chris, I'm going to turn to you, and this again kind of comes out of what Michael was saying. So I guess one of the big problems legal teams face when it comes to using technology is capturing metrics, right? Getting KPIs. There's a fine line between finding something interesting and making it even useful or cost effective. So how important are metrics to you in your role, and what part do they play when it comes to using legal tech?
Sure. So metrics are a big deal for us. I think it was a few years ago when DreamHost had sort of a data revolution. We had always been very data heavy, but it hadn't trickled down into all of the teams yet, including legal. So what we did was we basically established KPIs and metrics for almost everything that's truly measurable and valuable for the entire company, not just the teams. And we essentially created a dashboard for us every morning. So we would literally wake up and walk into our offices. And not only did we have TVs around the office that would splash metrics on the screen for us, like just company MRR revenue numbers, all the way down to a personalized dashboard where I would log in the mornings and see metrics that were important to my team and cross-functioning teams. So, and I'm just thinking back to these, I mean, these could be as basic as things like time to completion of tasks, or for us specifically, it would have been like cost per legal dispute, outside counsel spend on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, frequency of the total regulatory issues that we're facing as not only a team, but as a company. But they're also cross-team and company metrics. So we would be looking at team efficiencies, like how fast are other teams responding to us when we have requests, or how fast are project managers responding to external requests that legal is sending out to get things done. So it makes a huge difference on a daily basis because it gives you a snapshot of your team health in just a few seconds, right? And I think, but going back to the point you just made, they obviously need to be important and measurable. They can't be things that are not useful, but it's very useful for us to come in and see, for example, that, outside counsel spend is down, let's say 80% over the last 3 months. And that's usually great news. That's awesome. But then you also look at other metrics, you look at time being spent on certain things by team members, and you notice that, okay, maybe there's more time being spent on things that shouldn't be a priority for the team. And therefore, could that be causing burnout or stress issues for the team? It can go into so many different directions when you're monitoring all these statistics and metrics. And also, I think the data that we're looking at can help with other issues. Like if I notice that everything is equal, but there are certain issues coming from other teams, this goes back to the point we made about general counsel or just in-house counsel being more than just a legal siloed contract reviewer, right? You're more of a business advisor. So if we notice that there are issues from other teams, that's an opportunity for us to step up and say, hey, maybe this product team needs to, look at something that may be disrupting them internally. There may be something wrong in this process. Maybe, we can step in and help them. So it really helps and goes both ways.
It's interesting. Does anyone else have an example of that? How data or information generated from the kind of legal team has been turned to help other parts of the business? I don't know if Reggie, Chris, Paul, if you have any examples of that.
Yeah, so at DocuSign, we were doing a high volume contract, sort of 30, 40,000 contracts globally on a particular quarter. And we would do post-contract analysis on each one of those quarters and try to determine sort of what were the key provisions that our sales teams were struggling with our customers, right? We would analyze those provisions and we'd understand exactly, say for 47 times there was a choice of law issue came up, and 47 times we ultimately agreed to the customer's request on choice of law. We stopped negotiating that provision going forward, right? Why keep having the same negotiations on the same provisions over and over again when you're going to ultimately accept either New York or Delaware or sort of the key provisions where people jurisdictions where people.
Sorry to interrupt. Was that a data-driven decision then? Did you?
Correct. Right. We could just literally look at what were the issues that popped up from a data analysis of our contracts, and then basically put in guardrails. So we would tell the sales teams, look, if the customer talks about this jurisdiction, here's the 5 jurisdictions where we don't have a problem. We don't have to come back to legal. You don't have to touch legal anymore. Go ahead and agree to that provision. And it came up in the context of limitation of liabilities, indemnities, and other things. So we could basically put guardrails in place, and you want to start here, but we're willing to go to here, here, and here. And you don't have to have a protracted legal negotiation over basically getting that deal done. So I think it drove a lot of efficiency in our contracting process on a go-forward basis. So we didn't keep doing the same negotiations over and over again to end up at the same result and spend everybody's time and energy doing it. So I do think it created a lot of efficiency, the data coming from the legal team in terms of how we would approach new customers.
Okay. And Paul, I'd be interested to get your thoughts. I mean, I'm guessing a lot of the value at Ellucis is basically IP. So I mean, the contracting velocity must be quite high there. I mean, has tech helped you there generate useful data?
Yeah, I mean, sort of the biggest way it's helped us is what Reggie mentioned, is the speed with which you can actually execute contracts. So we work with a great many outside partners. And as far as metrics, one of the things we can do is look at the contracting velocity in each division or in each program. Say there are 10 programs working on different indications. And you can tell what's moving forward or what's not by the extent to which they're signing up with new partners. But the main thing for me has just been NDAs, right? When you're entirely IP based, you work with a lot of outside partners, whether they're contract research organizations or other service providers. It's just a sort of constant stream of them all over the world. And if it took mailing somebody an NDA to get it signed and then having that mailed back, we effectively couldn't function. DocuSign actually enables us to do basically all of what we do. And the other thing it does is it enables us to create a database of NDAs. So all the operators can at any time, there aren't that many entities working in the space. There aren't that many entities that have controlled substance licenses. There are more than you'd think, but they're not that many. And so, the odds are we've had a touch point with one of these third parties before. And for an operator to instantaneously be able to figure out, do we have an NDA in place? Is it expired for legal to be able to track? The company's been operating for 8 years. Some of those are out of their terms, right? So somebody may think there's an NDA in place, but actually it's expired. And so that's a big way in which legal tech has helped us, just the ability to, instantaneously sign those things, get them into a database, put an expiration date on them, put a calendar reminder for when they're going to expire, and then push that out to the organization. So you don't have to come back to legal to ask. So legal doesn't have to look up the NDA, figure out, oh, okay, that's the term. Oh, wait, but there's another term that's called the obligation period. So that's what's actually relevant, right? And so being able to just constantly and instantaneously track that and then push it out to operators so they basically don't have to email me.
Good. Okay, great. Look, I'm going to turn to Tom and Batya now to get a law firm view. So kicking off with you, Tom. Let's hear from you. So I think you worked with, I won't name the company, but it's a $300 billion plus Fortune 200 technology company. You worked with them to create a portal for patents work, I believe. So can you tell us a bit about the tool you developed, the efficiencies you're able to generate there, and what the lessons that this holds are for other legal teams?
I'd be happy to. It's a pretty detailed tool, so I won't go into all the details. I'll just give you the highlights. But as you guys know, I mean, there's a lot of off-the-shelf tools that people use, but now I think we're at the point where people can customize it with fairly low cost. And so what was fairly unique with this company is they partnered with us. They wanted our input to see what would be best for our teams to really be the most efficient in the work we do. And it's very high volume work. So we created this tool that really manages thousands of matters. And some of the highlights are, there's a dashboard that I think Chris mentioned also that he uses, but what's maybe unique here is each of our team members can look at the matters they're assigned to, see the progress they're at, any deadlines they need to hit, any upcoming deadlines, things that are passed. I can see all of our team members, the individual ones can just see theirs, but the in-house team also can drill down and look at what's going on. Another unique feature is that it's all inclusive. So it's all built around each matter. And so we don't send emails, obviously emails are getting everyone gets thousands of them in their inbox. And so it's hard to manage those, where to put them, where to store them. And so what this tool does is we now don't use emails. We use what's called diary notes. And we put those in the matter. In-house sees it, we see it, we get notifications on email sometimes. If you want to flag it that way so that we don't have to continue to keep checking the dashboards or the tool. And so it gives us a very easy repository to look at everything that's going on in a matter, from emails to documents to comments. And so that helps us with efficiencies, because when we're trying to figure out what to do with a certain matter, how to move it along, it's all in one. We don't have to go look at different areas of either our management system or the clients. So we all have the same access to documents and information. One other thing is that meetings are always hard to schedule, especially when there's 3 parties involved: outside counsel, sometimes the engineers at the client, and in-house counsel. And so what this tool does is, if I want a meeting, or if one of my team members wants a meeting, they will put a note in the tool and say, I'm available these days and these times. And so the tool automatically will look at the calendars of the in-house counsel and the engineers and automatically send out a meeting invite. And so it takes away a lot of, what works and what doesn't work with scheduling invites. I think, the key aspect, I think the big takeaway is that really it's a partnership. We have clients that say, here's our tool, use it, learn it. It's great for them. But I think, there's points where, it's not that easy for us. And so the initial tool was set up with the client's needs in mind, but we tweaked it quite a bit and it made sense. And so at the end, it made sense for both sides.
Interesting. Excellent. Thank you. And Batya, can we come to you on some of the legal tech work you've been involved in? So I think you were involved in handling back office subpoena work for a large client and various other things. But can you tell us about some of the stuff you've been involved in?
Absolutely, I'm happy to. As I think Eric mentioned earlier, not every client has in-house legal tools, legal tech tools. So as outside counsel, if we can offer assistance in that regard, we're, creating more opportunities and improving on that outside counsel relationship. And oftentimes in this context, we're not only helping the legal team, the legal department, but we're also oftentimes alleviating work that's perhaps been wrongly or clumsily delegated to an IT team that really shouldn't necessarily be involved in certain processes, or just doesn't have time because they're trying to do the IT work for the company. But one example I have is that, for a large financial services client that we have, a publicly traded company, they didn't have any kind of a document review tool, and they receive record subpoenas every week, and they were just getting bogged down, and things were being delayed. They were missing deadlines, and they were also having trouble with the way they were conducting email review, and maybe compromising metadata because they weren't using it, doing the review in a proper tool. So we stepped in and basically took on the role of a vendor in a way where we ingest the files, we conduct the review for responsiveness, we perform redactions, we run productions, all in the background. So the subpoenaing party doesn't really know we're here. And then we give everything back, and then the client produces it, and they absolutely love it. And we've set it up with a paralegal team with attorney oversight. So the efficiencies are there, the costs make sense for the client. But they don't have to have their own document review tool in order to make that happen. So that's been a very successful program for us. And we also have been using tech in terms of the privacy work that we do. You all are probably familiar with our California's Consumer Privacy Act. Well, that law meant that most clients with a website had to update their public-facing privacy policy. And because the law is so broadly written, it applies to many businesses that don't need a highly involved bespoke policy, and they don't want to pay for one either. And it's just, oh God, just what do I need to do to comply? Give me the minimum. But what we did in order to sort of fill that gap was build a tool that turns specific information that the client inputs directly into an electronic questionnaire into a basic code compliant policy. We can then tweak it if we need to, but the bones are there, are the guts of it, and it's so efficient. It's not quite 12 seconds, but it's getting close, so, and clients really appreciate that we're part of the solution and not just saying, okay, we'll go throw a bunch of lawyers at it at the hourly rate. We're actually going to provide a product here that makes a lot of sense in terms of the legal risk analysis and what's really at issue. And then lastly, and this is may seem more obvious and may seem very simple, but having access to current financial analytics at the matter level, at the client level, and matters as compared to budget instantaneously is really a highly effective and helpful tool that we use internally. As a law firm is a business providing service to clients. When we're reporting back to in-house counsel on a phone call and they say, well, how are we doing against the budget, or what's coming down the pipeline, or what's going on in that other matter? If I have access to all of that data and don't need to call accounting and run a bunch of reports, it demonstrates to our clients that we're paying attention to those issues and we care about those issues and that we are too business minded. And I think that just improves and deepens our partnership.
Okay, excellent. And I believe one of the other things you're involved in is kind of overseeing the e-discovery team there at Hanson Bridget. So does AI come into the litigation work you do at all?
It most certainly is, and absolutely, it's the document review process that I think a few people have already touched on a bit. If we're using a few AI tools to improve our e-discovery processes to make them, again, more effective, more efficient, including testing and refining search terms using AI, confirming the completeness and defensibility of our clients' ESI collections. And then, of course, so the collection has to be defensible. How do you figure that out, right, without some tool? When you're talking about huge volumes of data. And then, of course, at the end of the process, you're mining your own production and the opposition's productions for the information and evidence you need to build your case. And so what we've been using is a tool called conceptual clustering, which I'm very visual, so I love this. So you can zoom in on a cluster of documents and around a particular topic or concept or search term and see what's coming up around that. So it's gone are the days, referencing the banker's box, even a doc review, gone are the days where you click on the first one and then you click on the second one and you click on the third one. Let's go in topically and zoom in and look around an issue and what's coming up around that. And then from there, we can sort of evolve our search and evolve our approach. We also have been using, not surprisingly, predictive coding and modeling, to automate some of the document review. And then the other tool that we've been using that I really like also is a data visualization where you can use pump the review and get various charts that make it very obvious where things are and aren't. I just want to use a timeline example. We have a case where we have 11 years worth of email and you put it into this data visualization tool and you can see where there are huge gaps. I don't know how it would be very difficult or time consuming in order to get that kind of simplified overview without using a tool, either manually, God forbid, or just using other clumsy searches. And in this way, you can see, for example, what's missing from the other side's production and why. What's missing from our collection and why? Oh, is that when they changed email systems and they lost a bunch of data? We need to know about that. Things like that, where you can really get an overview that's quality and informative. And then you can also use that kind of information to zero in on substantive issues. There was that key meeting back in 2018. What kind of volume of email was happening around that meeting before, after, by whom, to whom, and zero in on helpful information that way, just so efficiently.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm going to jump now, if I may, to Eric. So we'll round out this section with your thoughts. So Eric, I think you mentioned right at the start that you're in charge, or one of the people in charge of the Lavery Legal Lab on artificial intelligence, the L3 AI, and obviously the firm has a particular focus on emerging legal technologies. Can you just give us a bit more detail on the work you've been doing here, and what some of the biggest successes have been?
Yes, well, we've tested a bunch of tools, at least 30 different tools, just to see their performance. And we've tested, for example, several patent search technology, and we've selected one in the end, which proved very effective and very user-friendly. It's a bit like Batya mentioned. It learns from the searching process, and it's concept based. Sometimes people even don't realize that it's AI driven. It's just very efficient. So we've selected a few tools like that for our own use. We're helping clients select the tools that can be efficient for them. But more importantly, we've established a dialogue with some vendors, and we're providing feedback to some of them to develop tools. For example, we have a very ongoing dialogue with the developer of a contract reviewing tool, which can be used also for due diligence process. We have a platform that we've helped develop in the sense it's a platform to do management buyback, exchange of information, to also generational transition in the corporations. So we worked with them to improve their cybersecurity. We've looked at what were the issues, how they worked within that company, how the information was flowing, and we made a bunch of suggestions to them, and they're currently implementing that. So for us, the success is not only the tools that we've decided to use, but it's also trying to shape other tools that will maybe prove disruptive for our profession.
Okay, great. Look, I'm going to jump to you, Chris, to bring this back to a comment Michael made earlier. So I think Michael said the difficulty is not finding tech, but getting the people in your legal team to use it effectively. obviously you don't want tech to suck up internal resources. That's always a challenge. But I think one of the things you've done at DreamHost is turn to project managers to help them manage your tech stack. So can you tell us a bit about this and give us a sense of how it's improved efficiency?
Of course, sure. So a project manager, I mean, similar to someone with a legal ops title, they perform multiple functions, right? So they would plan and define a matter before it begins. They would manage the matter throughout the ordeal, and then they would complete the matter and then also evaluate the project and make adjustments after the fact. And so what we've done is we've not only assigned PMs to the legal team, but these PMs are now managing our tech stack. So they get involved from the beginning, whether it's vetting the vendors and third parties and presenting us with their findings and opinions, especially telling us whether they consider the tools to be useful, because they will be involved in managing these tools. So from the get-go, they're involved in vetting. And also once we choose a vendor and we choose what we want to go forward with, they're also involved in implementing the tool with us. So, one thing we noticed, especially 8 years ago when I first started working at DreamHost, we only had 2 attorneys at the time and nobody else on the legal team. It was kind of a shared team between legal and HR back then. But the responsibility of implementing and finding, forming, and managing all these tools fell on the shoulders of the attorneys. And that was a huge time grab and a huge waste of resources, because 90% of the day was spent on tech issues or figuring out what the product was. So now these PMs have come in and they not only work with us, but the entire company and cross team to implement these tech stacks. They help educate not only our team members, but also company-wide team members, so that everybody is involved in the process, right? Because no program, no software is useful if nobody has buy-in. Like if we implement something that we thought was very interesting and we went to one of our product teams and told them about it, and we're like, look, this is the process that's going to be involved now, and there's a huge change and you have to change everything you do and do it this way. Most of the time, that's a huge disruption to a company, right? And people don't want to change, even if it sounds like it's more efficient or it may be more useful. There's always this blocker where you have to change things. So these PMs for us handle that entire transition. They handle the cross-functioning aspects of all of these tech stacks and these tools. And what they do is they implement them across the teams. So when we're sitting back and working through the process, all of our other teams have immense buy-in. And not only that, they're interested and they're learning more about the product. So our PMs, just like I said, like legal ops, they've become essentially mini, I like it's almost like a mini CEO. It's someone who sits back and they can plan all aspects of the business, but then they can also do everything as well. So it's a huge help. And I think it's something that a lot of people talk about in in-house communities, but it's not something that's realized yet. If you look at a lot of in-house teams, most don't have this sort of function, even though they think they may. But I think it's crucial to how tech will advance our legal system.
I don't know if he's a friend of yours, but Chris Young, who's a GC of Ironclad, speaks in the report about this, but he's very interesting as well on this topic. He echoes a lot of your views. Look, just to round this out, I know we're coming to time, but Reggie, I want to turn back to you. So you're the doyen of in-house legal tech. You've been tracking this long enough to see who's been swimming naked. So I want to get your views on how GCs can navigate what is a fairly unpredictable market, right? I mean, specifically in terms of the longevity of a lot of companies. It's a big upfront investment buying in legal tech. And I guess if the companies you're buying from aren't going to be around in 3 years, then that's a problem. So do you have any advice for any of the GCs watching the video?
Yeah, it's a hard place to be right now when there's so much transformation going on and transition to tech. You've got hundreds and hundreds of companies that are out there pitching, and candidly, many of them won't be around in 3 to 4 years. So you're very nervous. Worst case scenario is you've invested a lot of money in a tech company to do a certain function within your legal operations, and then they just go out of business, or they get acquired, or their technology becomes obsolete. It's funny, a few minutes before we started, I got an email from Clock about a presentation. It's entitled "A Nightmare on Implementation Street: True Tales of Legal Tech Terror." So clearly there's a lot of concern out there, I think there's a few things you can look at. You can talk to other people and see who's using what. If you bump into 5 or 6 or 7 GCs who are all using a contract management system, it gives you a little bit of comfort. If you see interoperability, that's another key component. If the tech that you're thinking about buying isn't interoperable with any of your other tech stack, probably not a good sign that they're going to be a long-term participant in the technology story that you're building. So I think there's a couple of things. One, just sort of do your benchmarking with other people to see what they're using. And that's what Clock has been particularly good for in terms of just getting benchmarking and data. And then also, I think it's really key, if you're going to buy some system and it doesn't speak to, interoperate with, or deal with any other system, boy, that should definitely raise some concerns that might not be a long-term play. But it is a choppy area. And I would just tell people, you've got to move. Sitting back and doing nothing is going to cost you money and be inefficient. So you need to move in some direction, and just hope that you're moving as best you can in the right direction, but there's no guarantees.
Okay, good advice. Paul, I'm going to turn to you. So Reggie's mentioned Clock a few times, and I guess we're broadly discussing the subjects of knowing what's out there, doing vendor due diligence, and organizations like Clock are a big part of that. But I believe you're the co-founding member of an organization called Tech GC. So can you tell us a bit about the role that peer networks play in building that type of institutional knowledge and making sense of the legal tech landscape?
Sure. So this ties it nicely with what Reggie was saying about benchmarking. So Tech GC is a network of emerging growth company general counsels. So I'm at a pharma company, and a law school classmate of mine is the GC of a company called Ruggable, which predictably
sells rugs, presumably.
A rug company, yeah. But so really, they're emerging growth companies. And what the organization does, it provides sort of interesting CLE type content, and networking conferences and all of that. But the main thing it provides is just a listserv of other people who are doing the same thing, right? So coming from a big law firm environment, if I needed to file an ex parte motion in some strange part of Indiana that had weird rules, it's almost certainly the case that somebody at the firm has done that before. There's an exemplar document, and they have advice. Then you go in-house and you have a lean team, and suddenly you've lost all of that institutional knowledge. You don't have a document library. You don't have a bunch of people who have done what you're doing before. And so Tech GC, you can email out, and it's almost certainly the case that somebody's run into whatever strange, employment immigration issue that you're having. And the organization retains all of those exchanges. So you can go back and search. You don't just have to send them an email. You can go through all of the sort of prior answers. And I think that's really helpful, particularly at smaller companies. A number of people have mentioned here being the first lawyer at a company. Well, then there's no repository, right? There's no institutional history. There's no sort of backlog of documents. And so being able to reference frame against a bunch of other general counsels who have faced similar issues to get exemplars from them is really helpful. I think, including in selecting vendors. I mean, it is, that's a lot of the emails are, hey, I'm looking at, a solution in this space. Has anybody heard of this company? And people tend to be pretty candid. Sometimes you get a response back that it's, yes, and absolutely don't do that, right? Which is as helpful as a recommendation.
Yeah, I belong to Tech GC, and I echo everything just said. They're very, very quick way to get really good insights and guidance on what people have experienced, good and bad.
Okay, so look, I guess to close this out, these organizations are a way of with GCs getting together and sharing information without using law firms. But let's look at the relationship between in-house teams and law firms. So I'm going to ask you, Chris. I mean, do you expect your firms to kind of come to you with advice on legal text that are useful, or how to implement certain solutions? Is that something you're doing as a GC?
I do, and I think it depends on the area of law that we're talking about specifically as well. But I think there is an expectation that outside counsel can talk when it comes to these situations, and I think a lot of times there are. I think we mentioned this earlier, but there are situations where I can sit down and maybe run a quick Google search and understand something about legal tech that I want to learn about. And I'd rather do that myself as opposed to paying a partner at a firm to run a Google search and bill me at $1,000 an hour. So the expectation, I think, is there for them to understand and be able to guide us through some of these things. There are firms out there that are extremely well versed and understand everything that's going on in legal ops and legal tech right now, which is helpful for companies like everyone here. And I think it's invaluable to be able to pick up the phone and talk to your go-to partner and have them advise you for 15 or 20 minutes on a product or a service that you're thinking about. On the flip side, you have a lot of firms that may not understand these things. And it's important for them to be honest about it up front, because you don't want them wasting their time and your time. But I think that's the sign of the times. I think especially larger firms, they need to be able to keep up with the technology. And I'll be honest, we have had partners that we've just stopped working with in the past, because whenever we've mentioned something that's even remotely modern in terms of legal ops or legal tech, and they haven't had a single clue as to what it is. And going back to our points, they take 2 hours to advise us on an NDA and bill us for those 2 hours. It's not sustainable in this day and age. So I do think it's something we definitely look for. And I think firms are noticing that too, because as you may have noticed yourself, there are many firms that have now established like their own tech little side gigs. Like a lot of big firms have their own tech companies now that are running like legal ops, and they're doing different things to help the clients. So it's crucial. Yeah.
Is it the firm itself, or is it the partners at the firm that kind of affect that? I mean, look, presumably someone like Eric or Badger or Tom, it's obviously precisely why we invited them on to speak, know enough about legal tech that you wouldn't have any issues. But does that exist on? Is it the firm itself you care about? Do you want the firm to have a kind of robust understanding of legal tech, or is it just this? Is this just a partner to GC relationship you're dealing with?
If the partner understands it, I think that's a great start. I mean, like you mentioned, Eric and Batya, those are they are, I guess, dream attorneys to have as outside counsel, or someone to be able to pick up the phone and speak to, because they understand everything that's involved in the process, right? And so I think it doesn't necessarily have to be the firm. There are firms out there that we work with that are huge law firms, and you would assume that they're a little more old school in the way they have their processes set up, but their partner may be extremely well versed in tech. And so as long as your go-to person, your connection to the firm is well versed in it, I think that's a good start. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And Tom, I'm going to turn to you. So you're an engineer by training. You were at Hughes before. I mean, I guess when it comes to tech, getting buy-in from senior partners can be difficult as a firm. But what have your experiences been? Obviously, again, you understand the tech as an engineer. You've worked with this for a long time. But do you have any thoughts on how in-house lawyers and outside firms can partner up to drive efficiency?
Yeah. So the first point, James, I think Chris mentioned this, is change is hard. It's I think we almost have to force change on people to make them do it, because obviously if something's working for them, something may work better, but it's easier. I mean, the wrap up time, they may not want to do that. They're comfortable. And so what we've seen most effective is really when clients say, you need to do this, or have knowledge of this. We're seeing more and more RFPs now where clients are asking us, are you familiar with this tool or this technology? Do you have it in use in your firm? And so that's a big part of, when clients engage, is they want a firm that really knows either their technology, what they're using on the back end, or, that we can do, we have tools that improve efficiencies, reduce legal fees for them. That can be driven home with partners that are in charge of those clients, to the team, our team, I can say, we need to do this, we need to buy this tool, or we need to learn it and use it more. I think, taking it even one step higher is what I mentioned earlier with that customized tool. So if our attorneys can be involved with the client, they're much more likely to use that tool because they had input on what works and they feel, much more attached to it rather than saying, here, use it, learn it. So that may not be as easy because, again, it takes time on both sides, but I think it's well worth the time and effort because, again, the efficiencies can be tremendous.
Okay, great. Reggie, we're coming right to the end, but Reggie, I just want to get your take on this. So you've led teams for a number of years. I mean, have you seen a generational shift? Do you notice that younger in-houses are kind of turning away from law firms or partners that are not sufficiently tech literate?
Absolutely. I'm 58. I'm getting older myself, and I've definitely seen a change. I've been lucky to work with some amazing teams, and I guess I'm most proud of the fact that I've had 16 people that work with me go on to be general counsels of companies in their own right, either in the city or in the Bay Area. So lots of folks spread across the company. And I guess there's two things are true for in-house counsel. All of them are disappointed that they're not being promoted every 2 years. When you're a fast-moving tech company, everybody wants a promotion really quickly, and sort of helping them understand there may be a longer track for promotion cycles than every 2 years. And two, people are growing up. Like I've got 4 sons at home, and they're so much more tech forward than I am, and a lot of young kids coming into undergrad, law school, and then into practice are extremely tech savvy, tech comfortable, and tech forward. And I'm definitely seeing friction between some of the more senior partners that have been referenced here in terms of, I have a number of senior partners I can pick up the phone and call, and we can get some really good insights in terms of just good judgment. And I've seen some young lawyers sort of want to throw that away because they aren't, that same senior partner isn't the most conversant with the most recent tool that's come into play. And ultimately, the senior partner doesn't need to be. That's not what you're looking for from them. You're looking for just judgment, experience, guidance. But I do think as lawyers, young lawyers that are progressing at law firms, they need to embrace technology because their counterparts in-house, who are ultimately their clients, are absolutely embracing that technology internally. And I think that's going to be a good foundation for them to be able to communicate with and work with each other in the same technology space.
Okay, great, cool. Look, just very finally, so Batya, I'm going to come back to you on this. I guess one of the signs of this change that Reggie's talking about is the way in which law firms recognize talent. I think I'm right in saying Hanson Bridget, your head of e-discovery, is a senior associate now, kind of on partner track, right? It's quite rare to see a firm formally placing non-lawyers, as they're called, on the same progression structure and putting them on a partner track. So is this, can you tell us a bit about this? Is it a sign of broader change in the industry?
Well, I think some of my partners would be sad to hear me say it, but they're not always the best person for the job, you know? And so, yes, it's a sign that it's a sign of change for sure within law firms, the idea that you would give a non-partner a leadership role of that importance. But we went with the best person, the most qualified person. And so, yes, our e-discovery counsel is a senior associate, and he will be a partner one day, I have no doubt, and probably very soon. But we found that it is our senior associates and our junior partners or younger partners who are in that sweet spot, just to use Reggie's word, they're tech savvy, but they also have enough legal practice experience to be able to marry the two reliably and smartly. They can appreciate the value of tech in the practice, but just understand its application, and then also be counted on to fully incorporated into their day-to-day work. And I love that nightmare on Implementation Street. And I think one thing that we're adopting is just sort of giving up on trying to convince every senior partner that they have to participate in all of this, and go with the team that can handle it, that's interested and excited about it, and where we're going to see our next generation of growth. And so I think that's a shift. Instead of being top down about implementation, let's go with the folks where it makes the most sense and we have the best opportunity for success.
Excellent, great. Well, look, let's close this out. And apropos of nothing, apart from the fact that it's a very interesting story, I'm going to turn to Paul. This has nothing to do with legal tech at all, but you were telling me earlier that the serotonin receptor, was it 5-HT2A, I think you said, was originally discovered in the gut. So your company uses psychedelics for medical purposes. Can you tell us a bit about what you're doing and what that involves from a legal perspective, shipping all these chemicals around the world? It's a fascinating story.
Sure. So I'll give a little bit of background for people who haven't been tracking this. There's a resurgent interest in research in psychedelics as therapeutic products. So Imperial College and some other academic institutions have conducted studies on the use of, for example, psilocybin in humans. That is the compound in magic mushrooms. And those studies have suggested some efficacy for treating depression. And you may also have seen there's an entity called MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, that's conducted research and is in trials on using MDMA, so yes, Molly, the rave drug, to treat PTSD, which you may know about because maybe not the strangest thing Trump tweeted about, but one day he did tweet about MDMA for PTSD. So our lead drug candidate, I can't talk too much about it because there's some regulatory issues around that, but is a proprietary form of psilocin, which is just the active ingredient in psilocybin, which we're exploring for various indications. As for the challenges, the legal challenges, so I sometimes like to play a game with myself where I imagine sending like one decontextualized fact about my day back to myself 10 years ago. And if future me just showed up and talked to me at law school and said, 10 years from now today, you will be writing a contract to ship a large quantity of LSD across international borders and provided no further information, I don't know what I would have thought, right? But it turns out because it's a heavily regulated space, you're effectively doing everything with affirmative regulatory permission. So it's not as terrifying as you might think, because there are so many procedures in place that it's pretty easy to know whether you're in bounds or not. But it's still, signing a contract like that still does, raise your eyebrows a little bit.
Well, I guess no one in the audience can see this, but I was able to detect whose eyes lit up every time you mentioned certain controlled substances. Interesting insight. Look, very finally, Chris, I know you've got an interesting extracurricular matter going on at the moment. I don't know, is this the forum to briefly talk about this, or is it not for this panel?
It's up to you. We can talk about it, sure.
Well, let's talk about it. It's interesting. So well, you go for it.
Are we talking about the weekend?
We are, yes. Sorry, it makes it look like we had some nefarious other thing we were talking about, but yes, we are talking about the weekend. I thought because Michael and Eric are both Canadian, I believe the weekend is Canadian as well, so let's go for it.
That's a good segue, I think, because we had this come up in another seminar a few days ago about in-house counsel doing side gigs and handling things outside the matter. And I think a lot of people initially think that it's, when you have one client, when you're serving one client, then it's impossible to do other things on the side, but that's not true. And DreamHost has been kind enough to let us do a lot of outside gigs. So we're actually separate from DreamHost. We have a copyright infringement lawsuit. We just sued The Weeknd, the artist, for blatantly kind of stealing a song that we have with one of our clients who put the song out a few years ago. So I think that's just, it kind of highlights what all of us do in our daily lives, which is we have our day jobs, then we also have a lot of other things we do on the side. But yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. But like we all do on a daily basis, there are so many different angles to handling everything from the internal legal communications of parties all the way to implementing legal tech. And this case has a lot of tech in it as well. Like there's a lot of musicology tidbits that we had to learn about and pick up on. But yeah, it's something interesting to mesh with your daily life, because you handle a lot of things for your day job, like I said, and then you have like these outside interests. And again, to spread it out a little bit more, I think we have so much we do in our daily jobs. Sometimes it's even if it's a job that you take on outside of your day-to-day runnings, it's something that kind of refreshes your mind, opens you up to other things that you've handled, brings in experience to your own firm or company that you're handling. And so it kind of gives you a view of the landscape that you would probably be otherwise siloed in if you're working all day in just one track. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, you've made an enemy for life with one of the people on this panel who looked particularly aggrieved when you mentioned you were taking the weekend to court. I won't reveal whom. But look, let's end it there. Look, thank you to everyone for joining us. Really interesting discussion. Really appreciate your time. Thanks to you in the audience, both here and on LinkedIn. The video will be up on our website. But look, thank you very much. Cheers.